President.
The Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, may I ask unanimous consent that the pending quorum call be lifted?
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak about the Disclose Act of 2012, legislation that will shine a bit of needed light into the flood of secret money in our elections. I'd like to start with particular thanks to Senators Chuck Schumer, Michael Bennet, Al Franken, Jeff Merkley, Jeanne Shaheen, and Tom Udall for their hard work on developing the legislation, and I look forward to joining them as this debate goes forward. The Majority Leader this morning moved to proceed to this vital piece of legislation. I thank him. I and many of my colleagues are looking forward to the opportunity to make the case in this chamber for this important piece of legislation. But in a sense, that case has already been made. As anyone who watches television knows, our airwaves are filled with negative political attack ads. The organizations that pay for these negative political attack ads all have patriotic-sounding names dotted with words like prosperity and freedom and future. The names sound harmless, but they're phony. All too often, the ads are paid for by secret special interests, billionaires and wealthy corporations seeking special secret influence in our democracy and drowning out the voices of middle-class American families. As USA Today put it just last week in an editorial supporting this Disclose Act, everybody's watching what's expected to be by far the most expensive presidential campaign in history, and not without a dose of horror. Freed by the Supreme Court, by spending limits, all manner of special interests are opening the spigots to buy influence. That's exactly right. All manner of special interests are opening the spigots to buy influence, and because their money is secret, the American public doesn't even know who is behind the negative political attack ads, other than the phony name. Here's how my home state paper, the Providence Journal, reacted to the original Citizens United decision that has unleashed this torrent of secret special interest money. The ruling will mean that, more than ever, big spending economic interests will determine who gets elected. More money will especially pour into relentless attack campaigns. Free speech for most individuals will suffer because their voices will count for even less than they do now. They will simply be drowned out by the big money. End quote. The Providence Journal could not have been proven out more correctly by the events that have taken place since. Senator John McCain said earlier this year, "I predicted when the United States Supreme Court, with their absolute ignorance of what happens in politics, struck down his McCain-Feingold campaign finance law, that there would be a flood of money into campaigns not transparent, unaccounted for, and this is exactly what is happening." Senator McCain, you were right, sir. Campaigns are no longer waged by candidates and parties fighting over ideas. They are now waged by shadowy political attack groups, posing as social welfare organizations, run by political operatives, linked to specific candidates, and fueled by millions of undisclosed dollars from secret special interests. When these secretive special interests take over our elections, it puts in jeopardy the key supports of a strong middle class, supports like Social Security, Medicare, Pell Grants, a progressive tax system, things that have paved the way for generations to achieve the American dream. Why do I say that? I say that because these special interests have motives to spend this kind of money. And, Mr. President, if those motives were good for America, would they be so desperate to keep what they're doing secret? I don't think so. Americans who worry now that Washington listens too much to the special interests, strap in, look out, and hang on to your wallet, because a secret special interest avalanche is underway. According to a study in April, 90% of the money being spent by super PACs, nonprofits, and other outside groups to elect the President of the United States, 90% of the money being spent by those groups is coming from secret sources, secretive corporations and billionaires whose names, whose motives the voters may never know, and who will have no accountability for how that money is spent. When there's no accountability for how money is spent because the phony front organization that purports to be spending it isn't real and the real party in interest has hidden behind a veil of secrecy, then there is no limit on what people will say. It is accountability that keeps public dialogue in reasonable check. That's why you and I, Mr. President, are obliged at the end of our campaign advertisements to say, I'm Senator Whitehouse, and I approved this message. I'm Senator Coons, and I approved this message. Well, relieved from that accountability, about 70% of the ads in this election cycle have been negative. 70% have been negative, up from 9% in 2008. 70% up from 9% as this flood of secret special interest money has hit. Even worse, if you look at the top 4 spending political 501c4, the secret organizations, the ones that hide their donors, if you look at the top 4 and what they've done in the last 6 months, an estimated 85% of their election spending was spent on ads that contained deceptions, according to a recent analysis by the Annenberg Public Policy Center. So you unhinge any real person from accountability for this spending. The special interest behind it remains secret. The ads become virtually exclusively negative attack ads, and they are riddled with deception. This is what the Supreme Court thought free speech looked like. This is all the result of that disastrous decision by the Supreme Court in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, which opened these floodgates of secret, anonymous, special interest money. I think it was a deliberate decision, but that's a discussion for another day. For today, our purpose is to point out that the campaign finance system, as a result, is broken, and it lends itself to corruption in new and unprecedented ways. The Supreme Court in the Citizens United decision, in its blissful ignorance, never even considered what happens behind the scenes. They talked only about the public debate, the public expenditure of this money. They assumed it would be independent of the candidates, and they were wrong. They assumed it would be transparent as to who was behind it, and they were wrong. But they also assumed that that was the end of the issue, what was put up on the air. They took no consideration of the behind-the-scenes meeting where the special interest comes in to meet the congressman and doesn't spend $5 million in secret-funded negative attack ads, but threatens to. And if the threat works, they buy the vote, nobody ever sees an ad, and the institution of government is corrupted. And it's one thing if you're a company and you say, well, you know, I'm going to be against you, and my CEO is going to have a party and raise money in $5,000 increments against you, and our PAC is going to give a $10,000 check to your opponent, and we're going to tell our workers that, you know, you're not a good person for our industry. Okay, that's not great, but it's nowhere near as dangerous as being able to say, we're going to put $5 million into a secret campaign of negative attack ads against you. Nobody's going to know it's us. If you play right, if you do what you're told, we'll lay off. But otherwise, look out, we're coming after you, and we'll be hidden, and it'll be negative, and it'll be nasty. That's no way to run a democracy. So today, the majority leader has moved to a bill that will bring at least transparency and accountability to our elections. At least these big special interests will have to say who they are. And then we as Americans can evaluate what their motives are, what the deal might be, whether we're actually aligned with their interests or not, and we can evaluate what they're saying about candidates. We will have more information. We will have a better quality of free speech. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. And in fact, disclosure has never before been a Republican or Democratic issue. This is about protecting our democratic process as Americans. And I really look forward to debating this important measure with my colleagues in the upcoming days. I am joined by Americans of all political stripes who are disgusted by the influence of this secret money, this unlimited secret money pouring into our elections. We're disgusted by campaigns that succeed or fail, that last or don't last, depending on how many billionaires the candidate has funding their campaign through these special organizations. More and more around this country, particularly in Rhode Island, with people I hear from at home, people feel that this government responds only to wealthy and corporate interests. They feel that the middle class can't catch a break, that nobody's listening, that everything is done for the big guys. They see their jobs disappear, they see their wages stagnate, they see bailouts and special deals for the big guys, and they lose faith that their elected officials are actually listening to them. Well, if you thought that was a problem before, when at least it was public, at least you knew who the registered lobbyists were, at least you knew who had made the campaign contributions, and at least you knew that there were some reasonable limits on all of that, all those gates have been knocked down. It is the Wild West now, and it's secret. 6 in 10 Americans say the middle class will not catch a break in this economy until we reduce the influence of lobbyists, big banks, and big donors. Guess what? With these fountains of secret money behind them, their influence isn't being reduced. It's going to be dramatically increased, and increased in ways that lend itself to corruption. 1 out of every 4 Americans actually say they're less likely to even vote because they believe that big donors and super PACs have so much more influence over elected officials than they do that they feel dialed out of the process. So why bother? That's a terrible blow to American democracy. Nearly 7 in 10 Americans, including a majority of Democrats and Republicans, agreed with this proposition. New rules that let corporations, unions, and people give unlimited money to super PACs will lead to corruption. You would think that that is a blindingly obvious proposition. It escaped the 5 conservative members of the Supreme Court who decreed that that was not going to be the case. 7 out of 10 Americans disagree with them. I disagree with them. The closer you get to elections, the more you see that that proposition is foolhardy. So we have the Disclose Act, a bill that Republican former Federal Election Commission Chairman Trevor Potter said is appropriately targeted, narrowly tailored, clearly constitutional, and desperately needed. I hope very much that we can join in this debate, that we can get this bill passed here in the Senate, that we can clean up our elections and begin to do something about this foul avalanche of negative attack ads, again, 85% of them containing deception, that is now polluting our public discourse. Prior to the Citizens United decision and prior to the floodgates actually opening up, there was a long and rich bipartisan tradition in this Senate of demanding disclosure of spending in elections. Many of our Republican colleagues in the Senate have loudly and clearly supported disclosure in the past. And I hope that they will join us in passing this important piece of legislation. The fundamental principle of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people is a government that will listen to the people, not just to the big special interests who can afford massive secret money. I urge my colleagues to support the Disclose Act of 2012. I thank the presiding officer. I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Gaga.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Georgia.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak for up to 10 minutes as if in morning business.
The Senate is in a quorum call.
I would ask that the quorum call be vitiated, please, and be
Without
allowed to speak
objection.
as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to pay tribute to Lieutenant General Ronald L. Burgess, Jr., the current Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and one of the nation's premier leaders in the intelligence community and in the United States military. Lieutenant General Burgess retires this summer after a distinguished 38-year career. During his career, Lieutenant General Burgess has been recognized with numerous awards and decorations, which include the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, Defense Superior Service Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, the Legion of Merit Meritorious Service Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters, Joint Service Commendation Medal, United States Special Operations Command Medal, Army Commendation Medal, Army Achievement Medal, NATO Medal, Former Republic of Yugoslavia Parachutist Badge, Joint Chiefs of Staff Identification Badge, and Army Staff Identification Badge. As a driving force in the intelligence community, General Burgess will soon conclude a career marked by exceptional leadership and strategic vision, both of which have significantly advanced U.S. national security interests, while also strengthening our national intelligence and military intelligence capabilities during a very challenging period in our nation's history. Throughout his time in uniform, Lieutenant General Burgess has demonstrated an unyielding dedication to duty and an innate ability to inspire enthusiasm and commitment to serve those he leads. Lieutenant General Burgess's selfless service to country and his unparalleled personal drive have been instrumental in transforming defense intelligence into a more capable and cooperative enterprise, providing the critical intelligence required by military commanders and policymakers both at the defense and national levels. Commissioned as a second lieutenant through the Auburn University ROTC program in 1974, Lieutenant General Burgess began his career with a series of assignments in armor and military intelligence units in Germany and at Fort Stewart, Georgia, where he was directly responsible for planning multiple highly successful national training center rotations, numerous command post exercises, and an Army training and evaluation program. Lieutenant General Burgess was recognized for his meticulous planning and forceful execution of operational procedures, which contributed significantly to combat readiness. Later, Lieutenant General Burgess held a variety of key staff and command positions, including Assistant Executive Officer to the Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, Washington, D.C. in 1990, and as the Battalion Commander, 25th Infantry Division from May 1993 to May 1994 at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. From July 1995 to May 1997, Lieutenant General Burgess commanded the 470th Military Intelligence Brigade, where he served with great distinction. As commander, he provided outstanding leadership, which led to the unit's operational success in support of the Commanding General of the United States Army South and the commander, U.S. Southern Command. During this period, Lieutenant General Burgess skillfully integrated a multidisciplined intelligence force into an extremely innovative warfighting asset, while also expanding the brigade's regional focus through more than 150 operational deployments across Latin America, the Caribbean, Europe, and Korea. While commanding the 470th, Lieutenant General Burgess also served as Acting Vice Director of Intelligence and subsequently the Acting Director of Intelligence for U.S. Southern Command. During this period, Lieutenant General Burgess guided a continuous flow of intelligence analysis in support of the year-long Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement hostage crisis at the Japanese ambassador's residence in Lima. Lieutenant General Burgess's support was key to developing the detailed analysis required by U.S. military commanders, our ambassador to Peru, and the President to make timely and informed decisions leading to the safe withdrawal of American hostages. Following his assignment at U.S. Southern Command, Lieutenant General Burgess served as the Director of Intelligence, the J-2, for the Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC, at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, from May 1997 to May 1999. During this assignment, General Burgess's leadership was instrumental in supporting continuous global deployments as well as major exercises and highly complex joint service training events. Mr. President, in June 1999, General Burgess returned to the Southern Command as the Director of Intelligence, or the J-2. Among his achievements while serving in that position, Lieutenant General Burgess led an interagency intelligence effort to create a fused Colombian intelligence capability that enhanced military and police cooperation against illegal global drug networks. Lieutenant General Burgess led Southern Command's intelligence response to many challenges, including potential migrant operations, tracking of Cuban exiles, hurricane and earthquake disaster relief, and sustained counter-drug operations in both the area of responsibility and throughout transit zones. From June 2003 to July 2005, Lieutenant General Burgess served as a Director for Intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. As the J-2, General Burgess directed all source intelligence analysis and reporting for the Chairman JCS, the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Staff, and United Commands. Lieutenant General Burgess served as the focal point for crisis intelligence support to military operations, indications and warning intelligence in the Department of Defense, and Unified Command Intelligence requirements. Assuming control of intelligence operations only months after the United States and coalition forces invaded Iraq, Lieutenant General Burgess was at the forefront of providing timely and insightful intelligence for operational requirements in Iraq, Afghanistan, transitional terrorism, and all developing global issues affecting U.S. interests abroad. In August 2005, Lieutenant General Burgess reported to the Office of the Director for National Intelligence, where he served as the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Customer Outcomes, Director of the Intelligence Staff, Acting Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, and Acting Director of National Intelligence. During this period, Lieutenant General Burgess played a key role in developing and reforming the intelligence community during an unprecedented period of global change. During General Burgess's tenure at ODNI, his leadership was key during the revision of Executive Order 12333, which governs all intelligence activities, the development of the first-ever joint manning document for military personnel assigned to organizations outside of the Department of Defense. Critical intelligence community managerial operations were overhauled, and innovative human capital practices were implemented under his watch. After completing his ODNI assignment, Lieutenant General Burgess was appointed the 17th Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency in March 2009. As the Vice Chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, I have personally witnessed General Burgess's thoughtful and ambitious program to strengthen DIA's ability to address the ever-changing requirements of military commanders and policymakers at the defense and national levels. Lieutenant General Burgess has focused DIA on our nation's greatest challenges, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, transnational terrorism, and preventing strategic surprise elsewhere around the globe. In doing so, General Burgess has reinforced DIA's ability to surge in support of contingency operations and crises, successfully launching a 24/7 crisis analysis cell at the start of the Libyan crisis and establishing an Afghanistan-Pakistan task force that refined the agency's ability to support ongoing combat operations. As DIA, he was celebrating its 50th anniversary. Lieutenant General Burgess charted an innovative 5-year strategy to strengthen and unite the agency's core defense capabilities while also focusing the agency on warning, core mission areas, partnership, and performance. DIA's new strategy emphasizes best practices to support our warfighters and policymakers in an era of persistent conflict and enduring U.S. fiscal challenges, and sets the path towards achieving the strategy's major theme of one mission, one team, one agency. As Director of DIA, Lieutenant General Burgess has worked to strengthen and improve the Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communications System, the secure backbone for much of the U.S. intelligence community, the White House, U.S. combatant commanders, and our allies. Additionally, he has led the effort to establish the Defense Clandestine Service, which provides enhanced collection capabilities in support of the highest priority intelligence requirements of the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretaries of the military departments, and the combatant commanders. No matter the range or complexity of the issues, General Burgess has always kept himself, his colleagues, and subordinates focused on the fundamental obligations and responsibilities borne by those entrusted with some of the nation's most important and sensitive missions. He frequently reminded DIA employees, and I quote, "While much of what we do is secret, our work is a public trust." And consistent with that view, General Burgess emphasized at every opportunity the non-negotiable need for intelligence professionals to always demonstrate the highest degree of integrity, both personal and professional. He often counseled new employees, senior managers, and military attachés headed to new postings that integrity is needed most when it is hardest to maintain. Mr. President, while much of what is said behind closed doors at the Senate Intelligence Committee is classified, I can tell you, my colleagues, and the American people that DIA is held in high esteem by the Senate Intelligence Committee as well as the entire intelligence community, due in no small part to the leadership of General Ron Burgess. DIA is an indispensable principal member of the U.S. intelligence community and has strengthened its performance as the functional intersection between defense and national intelligence. Lieutenant General Burgess leaves behind a more flexible and adaptive agency, one that is much more capable of meeting our national security challenges. Under his leadership, DIA has earned even greater respect within the intelligence community and continues to warrant Congress's strong support and trust. Mr. President, while the Army and the intelligence community will be losing a leader who has answered the call time and time again at such critical points in our nation's history, I know that Lieutenant General Burgess will be happy to reclaim his Saturday afternoons in the fall to root for his Auburn Tigers. And as a Bulldog, I continue to pray for him because of that. And that the Burgess family will cherish more time with a husband and a father. Mr. President, I wish General Burgess and his wife Marta the very best as he enters retirement. On behalf of a grateful nation and my colleagues in the United States Senate, I thank General Burgess and his family for his many years of faithful service and for a job well done. Thank you, Mr. President, and I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.